Hello, my name is Emily, and in this video I will be going over Advanced JavaScript Lesson 2. A quick overview of what I'll be going over today is that we'll be learning what objects are, learning how to create an object, learning how to modify them, and hopefully having some fun. The first review question is going to be which corner is 600, 600. So go ahead and pause the video, think about it, and then resume the video when you have the answer. The bottom right corner is going to be 600, 600. Next, how do we draw a rectangle? You can draw a rectangle by using the rect function and putting in values for x, y, the width, and the height. Next, why do we use variables? We use variables to store data. Last, what function gets called every time you click? The mouse clicked function gets called every time you click. So first, let's talk about what exactly an object is. An object is a data type that stores multiple properties inside of a variable. So unlike normal variables that can only store one value, an object can store many values in the form of key value pairs. These help organize code by grouping related functions and data. For example, if you have a cat object, it can have properties like fur color, eye shape, and functions like behavior, like meowing loudly. And rather than having separate variables for all of these, you can group them in one object since they're all related. Additionally, for example, if you have a song object, you might want to group together properties like title, length, genre, and functions like playing the song. Now let's go over how to create objects. Objects are set to a variable. They can have as many properties as they want, and they can store different data types like strings, numbers, lists, functions, or even other objects. This is a blueprint of how you can create an object. So you say var, you give the object the name, and then you set it equal to an object. So you use curly braces to define it, and then you'll have your property name, colon, property value, and then you'll have a comma between the different name value pairs. This is an example of an object. So the object is called Lizzie the cat, and it has properties age, fur color, likes, birthday, and speak. Notice how this has a lot of different types. So it has a speak function right here. You can always add parameters if you want to. It has a birthday with a value that's an object. It has a list value, there's a string value, and a number value. So how do you access all of this information? Once you've created your object, how do you reference the properties? There are two ways to reference properties. The first is by using dot notation, where you say the object name dot the property name. The second method is by using bracket notation, where you say object name, then you use square brackets and put the property name inside of quotes inside of the square brackets. Even if the property name is not a string, it must be in quotation marks. Now, how do you modify the properties? You can modify the properties by, for example, saying object name.property name is equal to new value to change values. If you want to add them, you would say object name dot your new property name is equal to new value, which is similar to changing values. And if you want to delete a property, you would say delete object name dot object property. Our goal for today is to make the cookie into an object. So in the previous lesson, we defined some properties of the cookie in variables, and now we're going to make an object to represent the cookie in order to show how these properties relate. So the first step is going to be defining the cookie object. So real quick, you want to think about what properties and functions should the cookie object have. I'll give you a few seconds to think about that, and then I'll resume. So you want to think about what variables we used to draw the cookie in the past, and these can help you brainstorm what we currently need. What the properties that we need include the x and y coordinates, size, cookies per click, and a function that returns true if the mouse is in the cookie. So in this case, we're going to call the function isTouching. So I'm going to give you a quick hint before you get started. So for the isTouching, this is going to be a circle collision since the cookie is going to be a circle. And a function that's probably going to be pretty useful is the dist function, which allows you to find the distance between two different points. So you put your x1, y1, and then your x2, y2, and it can return the distance between them. The way you can use this is you can find the x and y, that's the center of your cookie, and then you can compare it to the mouse x and mouse y. If the distance is less than or equal to the radius, that means that it's inside of the cookie, and if it isn't, that means it's outside of the cookie. So go ahead and pause the video and work on step 1 and resume it when you are done. Now we will start working on step 2. Step 2 is integrating the cookie object. So go ahead and replace wherever you use the old variables with the properties of the object. Additionally, only increase cookie count when the cookie is clicked, not all around the entire screen. And use the new isTouching function, and don't forget to update incrementing the cookie on key press. So go ahead and work on this and resume the video when you are done. So something else that we can add is we can add click effects. So you want to shrink the cookie on the click or on space press. So think about what property in the cookie object we can change to achieve this, and go ahead and once again pause the video, work on this, and then resume the video when you are done. Now I will be talking about the millis function. So the millis function returns the current number of milliseconds that has passed since the program has started, and it is constantly being updated. Something that's important to note is that 1000 milliseconds is the equivalent of 1 second. So if you have 5 seconds, that's 5000 milliseconds. If you have 2 seconds, that's 2000 milliseconds, and so on. To create timed effects, create another variable, time since last update, and measure the difference between the two inside of the draw function. So your code is going to look pretty similar to this, so you want to make sure that you have a time since last update function, get the original time when the program is being run, and then inside of the draw function, you want to have an if statement that's comparing the current time to the time since last update, and if it's greater than 1 second, so you want 1000 milliseconds instead of 2000 milliseconds, you want to go ahead and set the time since last update to the current time, so that later on when it's comparing for a 1 second difference, it's going to get the newest change, not the initial program. So go ahead and create a new property, cookies per second, in the cookie object representing the number of cookies you get per second, and then use the millis to add cookies per second every second to your total cookie count. So go ahead, pause the video, work on this, and then resume the video when you are done. Step 4 is going to be to display cookies per second and cookies per click. Go ahead and write the number of cookies per second and cookies per click on the screen. Make sure they update if you change the object property. So once again, pause this video, work on this part, and then resume the video when you are done. Now I will be going over the answer key for what we did today. So if you are stuck at any parts, you can review this and then go back and see if you can get it going. Okay, so the first thing you see here, we've made our time since last update. You can name this whatever you want if you want a shorter name, but the important thing is you're getting the original time of your program, so you have something to compare it to. Then you want to make sure you have your cookie object. You want to have an X property, a Y property, a size property. You want to have an isTouching property. That's going to be a function. Here you can see that's getting the distance between the X and Y of the cookie, so that's going to be the center, and then mouse X and mouse Y. And then it's comparing that to 100 times the size. So 100 is probably going to be half the width of this, so it's going to be half the radius. Or it's going to be the full radius, which is half the total width. And you have your total cookies, and you have your cookies per second and your cookies per click. So then over here, this is going to look the same as before. We're not really changing that. And then down here, you want to make sure that you're specifying it so it's specifically if you're touching the space bar, not just any key. And then specifically if you're touching the cookie when you're clicking, not just touching anywhere on the screen. Then when you're touching the cookie or when you're pressing the space bar, you want to make sure that you're changing the size real quick just to get that little bouncing effect. And over here, you're going to make sure that you're adding cookies per click and cookies per second as text so that the user can see what's going on and see what the numbers are. Over here in draw cookie, you want to make sure that you're using the properties of cookie instead of variables, since we took away the variables and added the properties. So you're going to be putting cookie.x, cookie.y, cookie.size. Then here you want to make sure you're doing the updates every second. So you're going to check if a second has passed. And if it has, add the cookies per second to your total amount of cookies and update the time since last update. Then down here with the mouse click, you just want to make sure you update it so that it's checking if the cookie is being clicked, if it's actually like on the cookie instead of anywhere on the screen. If it is, add the cookies per click, and then over here, if it's the space bar and the cookie is being touched, then go ahead and add cookies per click. So that means if I tap away from the cookie, it's not going to add cookies, but then if I tap on it and then I use the space bar, it is going to add cookies. So that was the answer key for the project or for today's work. If you had any parts that you were stuck at and you couldn't get it, hopefully that helped you a bit, and you can always go back in the lesson, see if there are any parts that you can look over again. And otherwise, I will be going over the recap questions now. So as I go over these, feel free to pause the video, think about the answer, and resume the video. First, how many properties can an object have? It can have as many as you want. So there is absolutely no limit to the amount of properties that an object can have. Next, what is dot notation? Dot notation is when you do object.property and it allows you to get a property value. Last, how do you delete a property? You can delete a property by saying delete object name, the property name. Last, before you go ahead and close your Khan Academy project, make sure you save it. So you should be pressing this blue save button so that it becomes gray and it says saved, and this just makes sure that you have your project for your next class and you don't have to worry about starting from scratch. So that's it for this lesson. Thank you for listening.